Have you ever looked at a giant mountain range or a really deep canyon and just wondered, how did that get there? Well, it wasn't by accident. It's actually the result of this epic, planet-sized tug-of-war that's been going on for billions of years. So today, let's dive in and meet the two sides in this incredible struggle, the forces that build our world up and the forces that are constantly trying to tear it all back down.
You know, it all starts with a pretty simple question. If gravity is always pulling everything in, why isn't the Earth just a perfectly smooth, featureless ball, kind of like a marble? The answer, it turns out, is that there are two incredibly powerful, opposing forces that are in this constant, dynamic battle for control of the surface. So, in one corner we have the builders. These are what we call endogenic forces, and they're powered by the crazy amount of heat that's boiling deep inside the Earth. And in the other corner, we have the sculptors, the exogenic forces. These guys are driven by the energy from the sun, and their job is to relentlessly carve away at everything the builders create. All right, first up, let's meet the construction crew, the builders. These are the forces responsible for all the big-ticket items on our planet. We're talking entire continents and the tallest mountain peaks you can imagine. So what's the most important thing to get about these endogenic forces? Well, they're all about pushing things up and pushing things out. Just think of them as the planet's own internal engine, constantly lifting, bending, and shaping the crust from way down below. This is what keeps us from being that smooth, boring sphere. And here's what's really wild. These builders work at two totally different speeds. On one hand, you have movements that are so unbelievably slow, taking millions of years to just gradually fold and lift huge sections of the crust. But then, on the other hand, you have these terrifyingly sudden movements. Bam! Like the catastrophic release of energy you get in an earthquake or a volcanic eruption. Let's focus on what the slow builders do best. Their absolute masterpiece: making mountains. Geologists have a great name for this: orogeny. This is what happens when you apply just an unimaginable amount of pressure to the Earth's crust over millions and millions of years. Okay, so picture this on a massive continental scale. You've got two tectonic plates smashing into each other with this incredible force. The crust that's caught in the middle, it has nowhere to go but up. So it starts to buckle and bend, first into these simple, symmetrical folds, then they get more intense, becoming overturned folds, until finally you've created a whole mountain range.
And this powerful building process doesn't just make one kind of mountain. It's not a one-size-fits-all deal. When the crust gets squeezed, it folds up, giving us giants like the Himalayas. But what if the crust gets stretched until it cracks and breaks? Then huge blocks of land can get pushed up, creating ranges like the Sierra Nevada. And sometimes the builders just punch a hole right through the crust, piling up lava and ash to create those iconic volcanic peaks like Mount Fuji.
But the builders don't get the last word. Not even close. Because the second any new piece of land is created, a whole new set of forces gets to work. It's time to meet the sculptors. These exogenic forces, they're basically the artists and the demolition crews of our planet. They get their power from the sun, which is what drives our weather, our rain, our wind, and their entire mission is to break down, carry away, and re-sculpt everything the builders just finished making. And every single one of these sculptors uses the same basic three-step toolkit. Step 1 is weathering. This is where they just attack the rock, breaking it down into smaller and smaller pieces. Step 2 is erosion. Think of this like a conveyor belt, where agents like water, ice, or wind come in and carry all those little pieces away. And finally, step 3 is deposition. This is what happens when that conveyor belt runs out of steam and just drops its load of sediment somewhere new. Now, this simple three-step process creates an absolutely incredible variety of landscapes. So let's take a quick tour through a gallery of some of the masterpieces created by the Earth's greatest sculptors. First up, we've got the most common sculpting agent on the whole planet: flowing water. Rivers are just these tireless carvers and transporters of rock and soil. When they're young and full of energy, rivers are really aggressive. They carve these deep V-shaped valleys as they cut straight down into the landscape. And you can see the whole cycle right here. All that material that gets carved out of the mountains has to go somewhere, right? It gets carried downstream and eventually deposited at the river's mouth, literally building brand new land in the shape of a delta. Next up, the heavyweight champions of erosion: glaciers. I mean, these are immense rivers of solid ice, and they are so incredibly powerful, just grinding and scraping away at the land as they slowly move. So unlike a river that carves that sharp V, a glacier is so big and heavy that it scours out a wide, flat-bottomed, U-shaped valley. It's a completely different look. And then when the glacier eventually melts and retreats, it just leaves behind all the rock and debris it was carrying in these huge piles we call moraines.
All right, our third sculptor is the wind. Now, it's pretty much always at work, but you see its most dramatic creations in deserts and other dry places where there's not a lot of vegetation to hold the sand and soil down. Wind-carrying sand is like a natural sandblaster. It scours away at the base of rocks faster than the top, and that's how you get these cool-looking mushroom rocks. And then that very same sand, when it gets dropped, forms these beautiful, crescent-shaped Barchan dunes that look like they're marching slowly across the desert.
And finally, we've got the relentless, non-stop pounding force of sea waves, which are constantly at work reshaping every coastline on the planet.
Waves just relentlessly attack cliffs and headlands, carving out caves and then sea arches. Eventually, that arch is going to collapse, leaving behind a dramatic, isolated pillar of rock called a sea stack. But then, all that sand that was eroded away gets carried by the currents and deposited somewhere else, forming new features, like a sandy spit that reaches out into the ocean. So, who wins this epic battle? Is it the builders or the sculptors? Well, the truth is, neither of them does. It's not really a war, it's a cycle. When you get right down to it, creation and destruction are locked in this perpetual dance. Mountains are built up from these incredible internal forces, only to be immediately attacked and worn down by all the external forces. That worn-down material, the sediment, gets carried away, dropped somewhere else, and eventually gets recycled back into the Earth's crust to start the whole process all over again.
And get this isn't something new. This cycle, this constant shaping and reshaping of our world, has been playing out for over 4.5 billion years. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The landscapes we see today, they're not permanent. They're just a single frame in an unbelievably long and dynamic movie.
So next time you're outside and you see a hill, a river valley, or even just a crack in the sidewalk, think about this endless tug of war. Ask yourself, am I looking at the work of the builders or the masterpiece of the sculptors? Which of these incredible forces are actively shaping the world that I'm seeing right here, right now?